The COVID-19 pandemic has been a time of growth, innovation, and opportunity for some, and for others, it's been not as much. To borrow from the Charles Dickens classic, A Tale of Two Cities, it has been the best of times and also the worst of times. Many of us have been forced to reevaluate and reconsider life after post-pandemic reality. Many of us have been forced to rebuild. When we talk about rebuilding, what are we actually talking about? We're talking about the need to start all over again. Now, my first real experience with having to start all over again came in 2009, when my wife and I decided to leave our home city of Toronto, big city, to move to Ottawa, Canada. Now, see, Toronto was our hometown. It's all we ever knew. All of our loved ones were there, but we went on this brave adventure of moving to a brand new city where we only knew 5 people. See, I was a political science graduate, and so my dream was to work on Parliament Hill. That was always the big dream. So Toronto started to feel actually small for me. So we made the trek over to Ottawa, and things actually worked out for us. A few months in, we both found jobs on Parliament Hill, and we thought we would live happily ever after. That's what we thought. Now, things actually went very well for us here in the capital. But some things also changed. I started to develop a little bit of a new passion. I got connected to the local music scene here in Ottawa. I started an arts and culture media platform in order to platform some of the talent that I was discovering in the city, and I was having a great time. I started volunteering at a local media outlet to brush up on my media skills. I bought a camera, learned how to take pictures, learned how to shoot video. What was really happening, though, is that the dream was starting to change. The dream was starting to evolve, and I needed to adapt. The suit and tie wearing political staffer and former organizational development consultant was becoming a creative, passionate about hip hop, film, and fashion. Now, soon enough, I lost my job on Parliament Hill. The dream job, crushed. I lost it. Got fired, which actually ended up being a blessing in disguise, because once again, the dream had evolved. So I started building the media platform, and everything was going absolutely well. We're doing the red carpets. We're all over Canada. People are starting to know who we are. Another change comes. My wife and I become parents. Proud parents of 3 children, all named with K, because that's what we do in our family. And so we had a great time. And so the dream started to change. I went from being a full-time entrepreneur to being part-time or full-time stay-at-home dad, part-time entrepreneur, aside from leading the media department at my church. Now, I had an amazing time being Mr. Mom, being dad, stay-at-home dad. I was learning how to puree baby food from scratch, learning how to do my daughter's hair. You should have seen people on the bus. Black guy on OC Transpo, elastic bands, spray bottle. I was amazing at it. I was planning day trips. I was doing it all. I was even wearing those little snuggly things on little day trips to the farm. I particularly loved wearing the snuggly. But eventually things got a little bit darker. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hit a dark place. I hit a wall. I had an immediate emotional breakdown out of nowhere. I saw no signs coming, but one day I entered a dark place. Small tasks, like getting my kids water from the fridge, felt like a huge task. My wife leaving me alone with the kids would have me shaking in fear. I would actually hide from my children. See, I was the one that they called in the middle of the night when they were sick. It wasn't mommy they called, it was daddy. There was times where I'd be at the coolest industry events, hanging out with cool people, and I'd have to leave because the kids wanted me, not their mom. I was the one they cried out to in the middle of the night. So things got a little bit hard, and eventually it just took its toll on me. And it was a very hard time. There was even some really hard times where in the middle of the night, I was tempted on a few occasions to pack a bag and leave, and I almost did. It was a very hard and emotional time, and eventually I even lost my position at the church because they didn't know what to do with me, and I didn't even know what to do with myself. I tried counseling, which did help a little bit, but not really. So eventually things changed because my wife found an article about paternal postpartum depression. Now, I didn't know that this was something that happened to fathers. We know about postpartum depression for moms. It's something that we're learning more about. But I'd never known that fathers could get postpartum depression. And those give or take 9 years of me staying at home began to take its toll on me. So I learned more about paternal postpartum depression. There was so much literature out there. There was a whole bunch of men that were just like me. Now think about it. I'm a black guy in hip hop. You know, I have a reputation to uphold. I'm supposed to be a tough guy. What am I doing with postpartum depression? What am I doing having crying fits? But that was the reality of what was happening, and nobody knew. Even now, like, talk to my old team members, like, we didn't even know you were suffering. We didn't know that you were in this dark place inside, but I was. And to be honest, I was alone. I did have my family. We'd have moments where they would crowd around me and they would hug me and they would pray for me and say, "It's okay, Daddy," as I just cried for no apparent reason, but I was empty. So a lot of times when, women say, you don't know what it's like to be a mom, I have a little bit of understanding. I play that card sometimes with my wife. But things eventually changed. And because I knew what was happening, I was able to rebound. I was like Stella. I got my groove back. I was cool again. Like, Kevin's back. I'm going out to events and everything. But then more change would come, but this time in my business. We hit rock bottom. The second of my 2 business partners that left the company, all of my 12 or so team members, gone. We weren't really making any money. So our business was shaken right down to the core. It was stripped right down to the core. And that was me. So the rebuilding process over the next 3 years would be the hardest rebuild of my life, because it really wasn't about tinkering with the team. It wasn't about a business plan. It was about me. I need to rebuild myself and my confidence as a leader, as a husband, and as a father. And eventually I did do that. I did rebuild. I did rebound. I got to this place I call the valley of decision, where I think every entrepreneur gets to, where you have to decide, do I close up shop or do I not? Every entrepreneur goes through it. And so I went through a process of really determining, do I shut what I'm doing down? I chose to rebuild. So eventually my wife joined me in the company. We love working together, so she joined me in the company. Eventually hired some staff, put in place a business plan, got a business coach, and things started happening again. Started to interview big celebrities, got back on red carpets. And I became so glad that I didn't give up. It reminded me of that meme, the gold mine guy who's hitting away, and he's one more strike away from getting to the other side of the mine in the gold. And that always resonated with me. The reason why I didn't give up, because I always thought about that meme. I'm like, I'm that guy with the little pitch axe, and I'm one more hit away. And eventually things did work out for us. The lesson that stood out to me throughout this whole thing is that, a lot of times these experiences really are a gift. Sometimes we do need to let go what was in order to embrace what can be. Sometimes we need to let the old die in order for the new thing to be born. It reminds me of a song called "Destroy and Rebuild" from my favorite rapper of all time, Nas, considered probably the best hip hop poet of all time. He comes from a neighborhood in New York called Queensbridge. And so in 1987, Queensbridge was on the receiving end of its own catastrophic event. Legendary diss track, "The Bridge Is Over" from Boogie Down Productions. So BDP throws this lyrical grenade over at the Juice Crew in Queensbridge and says, "The bridge is over." That's what the song says, "The bridge is over," and sent them reeling for decades. So 14 years later, Nas, also from Queensbridge, finds himself in his own lyrical battle with Jay-Z, and as well as members from his very own neighborhood. And so he references that song and says, "The bridge is over, the bridge is over. Nah, this is the time to destroy and rebuild it." Now that song never made sense to me. I was a young guy when it came out. It never made sense to me. I would recite the lyrics, but it really didn't resonate with me until this year in this pandemic. Destroy and rebuild. Destroy and rebuild. Sometimes you do have to let the former things go in order to embrace the new. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to let go of the old in order to embrace what can be. When you think about sports, it's the reality as well. Every offseason, every sports team goes through the process of having to decide, do I rebuild or do I retool, right? And there's a big difference between the two. When you think about retooling, it's just like a little bit of a tinkering here and there. It's looking at your team and saying, we almost have what it takes to win at the highest level. We almost have what it takes to win a championship. So we make little minor adjustments here and there to our team. Retooling is also about tools. Do we have the right tools for the job? when you think about rebuilding, it's drastic. It's a drastic measure. A lot of the definitions of rebuilding have to do with catastrophe, what you do after catastrophe, natural disasters. We see it all the time of countries having to rebuild. It's a catastrophic event. And I think we could agree, the past year and a bit has been a catastrophic event. And many people find themselves in that position of asking themselves, do I rebuild or do I retool? You know, even when you look at the Toronto Raptors, I'm a big Raptors fan, I'm a Toronto guy still. Toronto Raptors won a championship 2 years ago. Days after the parade, they have to come to grips with the fact they may lose their star player, Kawhi Leonard, who brought them the championship. And I'm sure many of us could just relate to the idea of right after a huge victory, having to embrace a potential loss, or being a part of a team and we just had a huge win and now we lost our star player. So just after winning a championship, the Raptors have to ask themselves, do we rebuild or do we retool? Now, rebuilding is obviously, as I said, very drastic. And in this time, some of us will have the luxury of simply just tinkering with our lives and rebounding. Some of us will require drastically starting all over again. When you look at the headlines of the past year, how many local businesses, how many staples in the community were forced to shut down after 20, 30, 40 years in business, starting all over again. Entrepreneurs who are 50, 60 years old, who only knew one business for decades, having to start all over again. It's a scary experience. It's uncharted territory. It's a venture into the unknown. When I look at my own story, back in the day on Parliament Hill, I didn't want to be there. It was safe. I didn't really want to be there. My friends, my mentors will all tell me, you know what, you're not supposed to be there. You're supposed to be in business full time. And I was like, nah, I'm safe. No one ever gets fired from here. I'm safe, well-paying job. Well, look what happened. But that's what happened to me. I was in a safe position and I didn't want to leave it. But I remember the days I used to sit at my desk and I used to pray to not be there. I used to say, man, I have 3 months left on my contract. How am I going to do this? Then I got fired. I realized that was a gift. I was pushed into a decision that I didn't have the bravery to make. I was wanting to start all over again, but didn't have the bravery to actually do that. And that's the case for many of us. During the pandemic, I've had the opportunity to work with a few clients looking to implement big change. Now, one thing I noticed with these companies, with these organizations, is that not all of them have both feet in change. If you want to change, you have to be all in on change. When I left everything I knew in Toronto and moved to Ottawa, I was all in on change. And there were so many moments in my life where I realized the moments where I was all in on change were some of the best moments. And so once again, noticing with different businesses and entrepreneurs, not always all in on change. Dealing with some of these clients, you really see that they're more worried about what they may be losing in clients or business or reputation than they are in what they may be gaining in the future. They're like a ship about to go on an amazing, amazing journey. The sails are up, the winds are blowing, the team is ready to go. Their anchors are still down. And so many of us find ourselves in that same place. On the surface, it looks like we want change. We talk about change. We're hungry for change. But below the surface, we're anchored to what was. So as we head into this time, or continue to navigate this time of unprecedented change, as some of us retool, as some of us rebuild, as some of us completely start again, I'll leave you with the final question. Are your anchors up, or are they down?